night everything changed. What if one ordinary summer night just changed the final chapter of a Hall of Fame career? What if a player who spent nearly 2 decades building one of the most legendary resumes in NBA history suddenly found himself facing questions that had nothing to do with basketball? And what if the biggest story of the NBA offseason wasn't a blockbuster trade, a championship celebration, or a free agency bombshell, but a mugshot? Because that's exactly where James Harden finds himself today. For years, Harden has been one of the most recognizable faces in basketball. An MVP and 1-time All-Star. A scoring champion, a player who helped redefine modern offense and inspired an entire generation of guards with his signature step-back three. But now, instead of discussing playoff adjustments or contract negotiations, the basketball world is talking about something completely different. A late-night incident in Houston, an arrest, a weapons charge, and a court date that could suddenly place one of the NBA's most accomplished stars under an uncomfortable spotlight. According to reports, the situation unfolded in downtown Houston during the early morning hours. Harden had reportedly been spending time with friends during the offseason, enjoying time in the city that helped transform him from a talented young guard into one of the biggest superstars of his generation. Then everything changed. A police stop, a firearm discovered inside a vehicle, a routine night suddenly becoming national news. Within hours, images began spreading across social media. Fans couldn't believe what they were seeing. Analysts immediately started debating the implications. And executives around the league were asking the same question: how serious is this? Because this isn't happening to a rookie trying to find his place in the league. This isn't happening to a player fighting for a roster spot. This is James Harden, a future Hall of Famer, a player whose career is entering one of its most important stages, a veteran who had just helped lead the Cleveland Cavaliers deep into the playoffs and was expected to play a major role in the franchise's future. That's what makes this story different. The timing couldn't be worse. The Cavaliers were preparing for an offseason that was supposed to focus on roster improvements and championship aspirations. Instead, the spotlight has shifted directly onto their biggest offseason question mark. And as more details continue to emerge, one reality is becoming impossible to ignore. This story is no longer just about one night in Houston. It's about legacy. It's about reputation. It's about whether a single moment can overshadow years of greatness. And perhaps most importantly, it's about what happens next. Because while some people believe this situation will ultimately pass without major consequences, others believe the outcome could influence everything from Harden's next contract to the way the final years of his career are remembered. And trust me, the most important part of this story hasn't happened yet. The court date is approaching. The basketball world is watching, and the pressure is only beginning. Before we continue, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from today? And if you believe James Harden will overcome this situation and return stronger than ever, comment 1 below. If you think this could become a major turning point in his career, comment 2 below. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with us because the next chapter reveals exactly what happened during those early morning hours in Houston and why that night shocked the entire NBA community. Houston at 3 a.m. The most dangerous moments in an NBA career do not always happen under the bright lights. Sometimes they happen when the cameras are off. No arena, no scoreboard, no roaring crowd, just a quiet street, flashing police lights, and one decision that suddenly becomes bigger than basketball. That is what made James Harden's Houston situation feel so stunning. This was not supposed to be a headline-making night. Harden was back in the city where his legend truly became massive. Houston was not just another stop on the map for him. It was the place where he became the Beard, the place where his step-back three turned into a cultural weapon, the place where he went from star to icon. After a long playoff run with Cleveland, he returned to familiar ground. The season had ended painfully. The Cavaliers had been swept, the criticism was loud, and the pressure around his future was already building. So for Harden, Houston probably felt like a place to breathe again. But after 3 a.m., that peaceful escape turned into a story nobody saw coming. Reports say Harden had been out with a large group before the traffic stop. One vehicle in the group was pulled over by Houston police. Harden then pulled up behind the stop. That single decision changed everything. While officers were interacting with the group, a firearm was allegedly seen inside Harden's vehicle. It was not hidden away in a way that made the situation disappear quietly. It was reportedly visible, and that detail became the center of the case. There was no chase, no physical struggle, no dramatic confrontation, but there was still an arrest. And in the NBA world, sometimes the absence of chaos does not matter. The headline alone is enough to shake the room. James Harden, former MVP, taken into custody in Houston. That sentence traveled fast. Fans woke up to it, sports shows jumped on it, social media turned it into a storm before most people even understood the details. And that is the cruel part of modern celebrity. The legal system moves slow, but Public opinion moves instantly. Before Harden could explain anything, before the court process even began, people were already deciding what it meant. Some defended him, some criticized him, some laughed at the bond amount. Others saw something much more serious. Because when you are James Harden, one night is never just one night. It becomes a symbol. And for Harden, Houston had suddenly become both the city that built his legend and the city where his legacy faced one of its most uncomfortable tests. The mug shot that shook the league in the NBA, images can become history. Michael Jordan crying with the trophy. Allen Iverson stepping over Ty Lue. LeBron James staring down the Warrior. Kobe Bryant walking off the floor with that cold, focused look. And now, for James Harden, one image began spreading for a completely different reason. The mugshot. That was the moment this story stopped being a legal report and became a national conversation. Because fans do not always read court documents. They do not always wait for official updates. They see a picture, they feel the shock, and they react. And when that picture was James Harden, wearing a serious expression after being booked in Houston, it hit differently. This was not just any player. This was one of the most decorated offensive players of the modern NBA, on MVP, and won one-time All-Star. A player who forced rule debates, defensive adjustments, and entire coaching staffs to rethink how basketball should be played. The same man who once had arenas holding their breath every time he danced at the top of the key was now being discussed for something no athlete ever once attached to his name. A weapons charge. A court date. Bon condition. That contrast is what made the story explode. One moment, Harden is a basketball genius. The next, fans are staring at a mugshot and asking what happened. And the timing made it even worse. He was not in the middle of a rebuilding year with nothing at stake. He was connected to a Cavaliers team trying to chase a championship. Cleveland had just made a major investment in him, pairing him with Donovan Mitchell, and hoping his experience could push the franchise into a new era. Instead of celebrating a deep playoff run, the conversation changed overnight. Can Cleveland trust him? Will this affect the contract? Could the NBA discipline him? Will sponsors react? Will fans forgive it? Those questions started spreading faster than the facts. And that is what makes a mugshot so powerful in sports culture. It freezes one moment and makes it feel permanent. It does not show context. It does not show intention. It does not show the full legal process. It only shows the fall. For Harden, that image became the emotional center of the story, not because it erased his greatness, but because it forced everyone to see how fragile greatness can look when one bad headline arrives. The Beard had spent years controlling Defender. Now, he had to control the narrative, and that battle might be harder than any playoff series he has ever played. Cleveland's silent panic. The Cavaliers did exactly what smart franchises do when trouble hits. They stayed careful. They released a controlled statement. They said they were aware of the arrest. They said they were gathering more information. They said they were in contact with Harden and his representatives. And then they said nothing more. That kind of silence tells you everything, because behind closed doors, Cleveland could not simply ignore this. This was not a random bench player. This was a major piece of their championship plan. Harden was brought in to stabilize the offense, support Donovan Mitchell, and give the Cavaliers the kind of veteran decision maker they believed could help them survive deep playoff pressure. For stretches, he did exactly that. Even at his age, Harden still showed he could control tempo, punish mismatches, create shots, and organize an offense when games slowed down. He was not the same unstoppable scorer from his Houston prime, but he was still dangerous, still intelligent, still respected. That is why the Cavaliers had a real decision coming. Do they restructure his deal? Do they extend him? Do they build around a Harden-Mitchell pairing for one more serious title push? Before the arrest, that conversation was complicated but manageable. After the arrest, it became uncomfortable, because front offices do not only evaluate talent, they evaluate risk. And suddenly, Harden's risk profile changed. Not because the case automatically ends his career. It does not. Not because one charge removes everything he has accomplished. It cannot. But because timing matters in the NBA, and this timing landed like a thunderclap, Cleveland needed clarity. Instead, it got noise. The team needed a clean offseason. Instead, it got headlines. The front office needed to discuss salary structure, second apron flexibility, roster depth, trades, and long-term commitment. Instead, one of the first major questions became, what happens in court? That is not where any contender wants to be. And somewhere inside that organization, someone had to be asking the hardest question of all: can we chase a championship with this much uncertainty attached to one of our biggest names? The public answer was patience. The private answer was probably much more complicated, because Cleveland cannot overreact, but it also cannot pretend. Image does not matter, fans matter, sponsors matter, Locker room stability matters, league discipline matters, every detail matters when a franchise is trying to win now. And Harden's future was no longer only about jump shots, assists, and playoff poise. It was about trust, Donovan Mitchell's loyalty. Every NBA controversy has a moment where people start looking around the locker room. Who supports him? Who stays quiet? Who distances themselves? Who speaks like a teammate? For James Harden, the most important voice was Donovan Mitchell. Mitchell had already made it clear how much respect he had for Harden. Before the arrest became the center of the NBA conversation, Mitchell had praised Harden as one of the players who changed basketball. He put Harden in the same type of conversation as icons who reshaped the game. That kind of respect mattered, because Harden's season in Cleveland was not perfect. In the Eastern Conference Finals, his production dropped. His shooting struggled, his turnovers became painful, and when the Cavaliers were eliminated, critics jumped at the opportunity to question whether Harden could still be trusted in the biggest moments. But Mitchell did not throw him under the bus. He protected him. That is not just media training. That is leadership. Mitchell understood something a lot of fans forget. NBA players know how hard the game is at the highest level. They know what it feels like when legs are tired, shots are short, and every mistake becomes a debate topic. They know the difference between failure and lack of value. So when Mitchell defended Harden's basketball legacy, it became a signal. Inside the Cavs locker room, Harden was not just an aging star. He was a respected veteran, a player whose mind for the game still carried weight, a player younger teammates could learn from, a player Mitchell believed had helped Cleveland become more dangerous. That is why this arrest created such emotional tension, because the people closest to Harden had reasons to support him, but the outside world had reasons to question him. Fans saw the mugshot. Mitchell saw the teammate. Fans saw a charge. Mitchell saw the player who helped carry responsibility during a playoff run. Fans saw a risk. Mitchell saw basketball value, respect, and maybe even redemption. And that difference is what makes this story more layered than a normal controversy. If Mitchell continues to stand by Harden, Cleveland's locker room could remain stable. But if pressure grows, if the legal case drags on, if the media keeps pushing the story, that loyalty will be tested. Because in the NBA, winning can protect almost anything. But uncertainty spreads, and even the strongest locker rooms can feel it when the outside noise gets loud enough. The contract problem, this is where the story becomes bigger than the arrest. Because James Harden was already entering one of the most important financial moments of his late career. The Cavaliers had plans, Harden had options, and both sides were trying to find a structure that made sense. Cleveland wanted flexibility, Harden wanted security. The front office needed room to improve the roster around Donovan Mitchell. Harden, nearing the final stage of his career, needed a deal that respected his value while still giving the team a chance to compete. Before the Houston incident, that path seemed possible. Maybe Harden takes a smaller number up front. Maybe Cleveland gets under a key financial threshold. Maybe the Cavaliers use that flexibility to chase role players, make trades, and strengthen the roster for one more serious run. It was not simple, but it was logical. Then came the arrest, and suddenly, every conversation became heavy. Not because Harden lost all leverage overnight. He did not. A player with his resume still has power. Teams still value elite decision-making. Cleveland still needs shot creation. Mitchell still needs help. And Harden can still run an offense better than most guards in the league. But contract negotiations are not just about what a player can do. They are about what a team is willing to bet on. And after an arrest, the bet feels different. Would Cleveland still offer multiple years? Would they add protections? Would they wait for the legal process? Would Harden's side push back and say the case should not affect basketball business? Those are the kinds of conversations that do not happen on television, but shape entire franchises. The second apron made things even more intense. In today's NBA, money is not just money. It controls movement, it controls trades, it controls depth, it decides whether a team can add the missing piece or gets trapped by its own payroll. So Harden's contract was not only about Harden, it was about Cleveland's entire championship window. That is why the timing hurt so much. A clean summer would have allowed the Cavaliers to move with confidence. But now, hesitation enters the room. Even if everyone still believes Harden will return, the emotional tone changes. The front office may still smile in meetings. The agents may still negotiate politely. The public statements may still sound calm. But behind all of it, one question remains. How much trust can you build into a contract when uncertainty is standing right beside it? That is the real cost of this situation. Not just legal fees, not just headlines, trust. And in the NBA, trust can be more valuable than money. The Houston legacy. To understand why this story feels so powerful, you have to understand what Houston means to James Harden. Houston was not just a chapter in his career, Houston was the chapter. When Harden arrived with the Rockets, he was already talented. But in Houston, he became something much bigger. He became an offensive system by himself. He became a nightly event. He became the player fans either loved, feared, copied, or argued about nonstop. The step-back three became his signature. The isolation game became his stage. The beard became a brand. The Rockets' years turned Harden into a basketball force. He led the league in scoring. He chased MVPs. He put up numbers that looked impossible. He forced defenders into impossible choices. Guard him too close, and he attacked. Give him space, and he launched. Send help, and he found shooters. For years, Houston belonged to Harden. That is why this arrest landing in Houston feels almost symbolic. The same city that helped build his legend is now the city attached to one of the most uncomfortable moments of his career. That contrast is dramatic, but it is also human. Many athletes have complicated relationships with the places that made them famous. A city can love you, celebrate you, protect you, criticize you, and expose you all at once. For Harden, Houston has always carried both magic and noise. The highlights are unforgettable, but the nightlife reputation has followed him too. The stories, the rumors, the debates about focus, the old controversies that never fully disappeared from public memory, they all sit in the background whenever a new headline appears. That does not mean every old story defines him. It does not mean one incident proves a pattern. But in public life, perception stacks up. And when a player with Harden's history gets arrested in Houston, people do not treat it like an isolated headline. They connect it to the larger mythology around him. The genius, the nightlife, the brilliance, the questions, the scoring title, the playoff disappointments, the MVP trophy, the late night headlines. That is why the story refuses to stay small. Because Harden has never been a small figure. Everything around him becomes bigger. His makes become iconic. His misses become debates. His choices become narrative. And now, Houston has given the NBA one more Harden chapter to argue about. Not on the court, but in the space where legacy becomes complicated, the league is watching. The NBA has always understood something simple. Stars are not just players. They are the face of the product. That is why the league watches situations like this carefully. A weapons-related arrest involving a future Hall of Famer is not something the NBA can simply brush aside. Even if the legal case does not become severe, even if the charge is eventually reduced or resolved quietly, the league still has image concern. Sponsors notice. Families notice. Fans notice. And in the modern NBA, one headline can travel across the world before the league office even finishes reading the first report. That is the world Harden is dealing with now. The NBA does not need to rush. It can wait for facts. It can monitor the court process. It can speak with the team. It can evaluate whether league discipline is necessary later. But silence does not mean indifference. The league is watching, and so are other players. Some players probably feel sympathy. They know how fast life can change when you are famous. They know how every move becomes public. They know that an athlete can make one mistake or be caught in one bad situation, and suddenly the entire world becomes a jury. Other players may see it differently. They may believe veterans have to know better. They may feel that someone with Harden's experience, money, and resources should avoid any situation that puts his team and reputation at risk. Both reactions can exist at the same time. That is why the NBA community's response is so complicated. Harden is respected, but he is also criticized. He is admired, but he is also questioned. He is a legend, but he is not untouchable. And that is what makes this moment so important. Because the end of a superstar's career is not only about statistics. It is about how people feel when they say his name. Do they remember the brilliance first, or do they remember the drama? Do they talk about the MVP years or the playoff collapses? Do they celebrate the way he changed basketball or debate the off-court headlines? That battle is happening right now, and Harden still has a chance to shape the ending. But it will require more than talent. It will require discipline. It will require patience. It will require humility. And it will require him to understand that every choice from this point forward will be judged through a different lens. Because when a superstar reaches the final stage of his career, people stop asking only what he can still do. They start asking who he has become. 3 tracks, 1 future. At this point, James Harden's situation is moving on 3 different tracks: the legal track, the basketball track, and the legacy track. Each one matters, and each one could affect the others. On the legal track, the key question is simple. How serious will this case become? A misdemeanor charge does not automatically destroy a career. Many legal situations are resolved without the most extreme outcome. Harden has resources, representation, and a long public career without this kind of criminal history defining him. But until the case is resolved, uncertainty remains. And uncertainty is the one thing teams hate. On the basketball track, Cleveland has to decide what it believes Harden still is. Is he a declining star who helped for a few months but cannot be trusted long-term? Or is he still a high-level creator who can extend Donovan Mitchell's championship window? That question was already difficult before Houston. Now it is sharper, because Harden's regular season numbers showed real value. He could still score, he could still pass, He could still control pace. He could still make teammates better. Cleveland did not trade for a name only. It traded for a player who still had skill. But the playoffs showed the weakness too. When the pressure rose, Harden struggled. His shooting dropped. His mistakes grew louder. And the Cavaliers were swept in a series that left fans wondering whether the team was truly close or simply not ready. Then came the arrest. That means Cleveland is no longer just evaluating basketball decline. It is evaluating total reliability. Can Harden stay focused? Can he avoid distractions? Can he lead younger players? Can he handle the responsibility that comes with being paid like a major piece of a contender? Those questions matter more than ever. And then there is the legacy track. This might be the deepest one. Because James Harden's legacy has always been one of the most debated in modern basketball. His supporters see a revolutionary offensive genius, a player who changed the geometry of the floor and forced defenses into impossible choices. His critics see playoff disappointments, foul drawing debates, and a style that did not always translate to championships. Both sides already had argument. Now this incident becomes another piece people will use when discussing him. That may not be fair, but it is real. Greatness does not erase mistakes. Mistakes do not erase greatness. The truth is usually somewhere in between. And for Harden, the final years of his career will determine how loud each side becomes. If he returns to Cleveland, stays focused, helps Mitchell chase a finals run, and handles the legal matter responsibly, this could become a difficult chapter that fades with time. But if the situation grows, if the contract talks become tense, if the Cavaliers hesitate, or if Harden's play declines, people will look back and say Houston was the warning sign. That is the pressure now. One case, one contract, one final act, and everything is connected. The lesson behind the storm. So what does this story really tell us? It tells us that an NBA career is never protected by talent alone. James Harden has done things on a basketball court that most players could only dream about. He changed how guards attack defenders. He made the step back three one of the most feared shots in the sport. He became an MVP, a scoring champion, an all-star again and again, and one of the most influential offensive players of his era. No single headline can erase that. But this situation reminds us that legacy is not only built during the good nights, it is tested during the hard one. For Cleveland, the strategy is delicate. The Cavaliers cannot panic. They still need Harden's playmaking. They still need veteran leadership. They still need someone who can help Donovan Mitchell carry the burden of a deep playoff run. If Harden returns focus and the legal situation is resolved without major damage, Cleveland may still have a real path forward. But the front office also has to be honest. Championship teams need trust. They need stability. They need their biggest names to reduce distractions, not create them. So the Cavaliers must protect the team while also treating Harden fairly. That means waiting for facts, avoiding emotional overreaction, and making decisions based on both basketball value and long-term responsibility. For Harden, the lesson is even clearer. At this stage of his career, every moment matters. He does not need to prove he is talented. That has already been proven. He does not need to prove he belongs in NBA history. His resume already speaks. What he must prove now is that he can control the ending. That means discipline, better choices, a calmer circle, a sharper understanding that when you are a public figure, private nights can become public storms. And for fans, there is a human lesson too. It is easy to turn athletes into symbols. Hero one day, villain the next. But real life is more complicated than that. People can make mistakes and still deserve fairness. People can face consequences and still deserve dignity. Criticism can be strong without becoming cruel. That is the balance. Hold people accountable, but do not forget they are human. James Harden's next chapter has not been written yet. The courtroom will matter. The contract will matter. The Cavaliers' decision will matter. But most of all, Harden's response will matter. Because sometimes the defining moment of a career is not the mistake itself. It is what a person does after the mistake. Does he hide from it? Does he blame everyone else? Or does he face it, learn from it, and return with a clearer mind? That is the question now, and the NBA world is waiting for the answer. If you believe James Harden can still help Cleveland chase a championship, comment 1 below. If you think the Cavaliers should move carefully before committing long-term, comment 2 below. And if you believe this story proves how quickly an NBA legacy can change, comment 3. Make sure to like this video, share it with another NBA fan, and subscribe to the channel for more deep NBA stories, player drama, trade updates, and the biggest moments shaping the league. Because this story is not over. And when the next chapter drops, you will want to be here.